I'm Lori Marcus, and this is The BAM Show.
This is The BAM Show, Barter and Marketing, where we get you the real deal. I'm your host, Joshua Smith from Sherwood, and today we have a very special guest. She has ran marketing for these teensy little companies. Maybe you guys have heard of them. Pepsi, don't remember that commercial, choice of a new generation. Children's Place. Everyone gets their clothes at Children's Place. My kids get their clothes at Children's Place. I could even buy some stock at Children's Place. Keurig, coffee maker everyone has in their house and office. Peloton, super cool, fancy schmancy bike, very cool exercise bike. My wife loves those. And most recently, this marketing advisory firm called Courtyard Connections. I'm pleased to introduce you to Lori Marcus. Lori, welcome to the BAM Show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Same here. Love to have you here.
Thank you.
I know you've touched on some companies that you've worked for. Can you do me a favor and elaborate a little bit more on sort of the start of your career and then the path that you've taken to get where you are today?
Yeah. So my career started a long time ago. I graduated from University of Pennsylvania a long time ago, and I moved to Atlanta to work for a company that was later acquired by Nielsen Marketing Research, but it was called Majors Corporation, Majers. So here I was 21 years old, and I was presenting to senior vice presidents at Tropicana and Maybelline, and then our premier client was Coca-Cola down at the Atlanta office. So at a very, very early age, I was learning how to analyze data, sort of bring it together, tell a story, and then really get schooled also in superior presentation skills because you're presenting to very senior sales, marketing, and marketing research executives of major Fortune 500 consumer goods companies. So that's where I started.
That's wonderful, because most people don't get that luxury of doing that, or by choice.
Having just recently completed an interim assignment at Peloton Cycle, which is an early stage technology-enabled fitness company, I got to see firsthand that there's a lot of young people who've gone from startup to startup to startup, which is incredible experience on one hand, but part of what I noticed is they never have an opportunity to get that foundational training.
Yeah.
These are all things that while it's so exciting to go from startup to startup and all that goes with the culture of a startup, which is amazing, there's also a void that I feel very privileged, which was to have gotten that foundational training at such an early age and then reinforced years later in the 24 years that I spent at PepsiCo.
No, it makes sense. So talk about Courtyard Connections.
Yeah.
What's this? This is a brand new venture for you?
People who know me, they always say I'm sort of the Kevin Bacon of the corporate world, like the whole 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I love
that Kevin Bacon.
I love Kevin Bacon. Yeah. And I'm a kind of a psychotic connector. Like I'm always connecting people. I must have been in search in a prior life. It's partly, I just love to do that. I love to connect people. But also as I started thinking about it, the word connections had a couple of different meanings. One is, as a marketer, I'm very into integrated marketing and very into that whole sort of, as a CMO, you're the orchestra leader. You're the one that brings everything together. Sure. So connecting everything is part of who I am as a marketer. But interestingly, my keynote speaking practice, where I talk about train for the career and life you desire, it's all about connecting things. So it's about connecting your work and your personal life and thinking about how to plan your work in the context of where you are and where you want to go in your life. I talk about the importance of health and wellness and fitness, sort of my version of the corporate athlete, and how important that is, and connecting that back to your life. And then I also talk about using your seat in corporate America to increase your social impact in the world. So for me, this whole notion of connections, it's not just thinking about connections in a professional way as a marketer, but my whole theme of everything I always talk about is really connecting the mind, body, spirit, and all of that with your work and your life.
Interesting. If an employee of yours, the marketing side, came to you with just some bonehead idea about, some sort of marketing implementation, and, you asked them to do this assignment, and they came to you, and you're saying to yourself, oh my God, like, I don't know what this person just came back to me with. What is in your opinion, because many have other opinions, what's the right way to say,
So the way that I've dealt with that, and certainly that happens many, dozens and dozens and dozens of times over the past 30 years, is So I'm straightforward. I'll always tell people, this is what I think about that idea. This is what I like about it. This is what I don't like about it. And my sort of general tactic that I use is I'll say to people, look, I'm not sold on that. I don't buy it. Why don't you convince me? And what that does is a couple of things. It really forces people to sort of hone their critical thinking about laying out the facts about why something is a good idea, whether it's a SWOT analysis or here's like the pros and the cons. It just forces people to get their thinking up, because I think sometimes what people do is they get so invested in their idea and they're like, it's great, it's great, it's great, it's great. And I always say to people, stop telling me it's great and tell me a little bit more about it and flesh it out a little bit more for me. And then I think three things will happen. One is I'll see all that, we'll have a discussion about it, and we might agree to disagree. And depending on the size and scale of the idea, sometimes if it's a small idea, and it's something that can be tested, I'll say, you know what, I don't agree with it, but it's small scale enough that go test it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not always right, and so go do it. Or we'll agree to disagree, and I may say, you know what, I'm going to adjudicate this, and we're not going to do the idea, at least now. The other thing that will happen is sometimes people will convince me. I never believe just because you have the big title means that you're right. I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I have no obsessive need to always be right. And so if somebody goes through and they lay things out a little bit more, they may convince me, and then we'll do it. Or the other thing is their argument really isn't that strong, and they were just in love with the idea. And then as we go through it together, and I'm a real sort of extrovert in terms of the way that I think and I process information, so actually going through it, sometimes I'll convince them that maybe it's not right, or it's just not fully fleshed out yet, and it's not right now.
Yeah.
So that's how I tend to
No,
approach
I think it's
that.
really important, and you just gave me some advice, because some of them are so quick to be like, no, and then there's no really explanation behind it. It's like, go back and get something else. But I love what you're talking about is, listen, challenge them to come up, sell me why this is. It doesn't matter. Yes, I may be your boss, and I may know more, I may not know more. But I think that is very important. That's great advice for people.
Yeah. And I think as a leader, you have to not just allow that, but you have to encourage it. So when you invite people to push back on you, there's a pressure on you as a leader to not just say it, but to really, with all your verbal and your nonverbal cues, to reinforce it. So if you invite somebody on your team or anybody in the company to push back on you, and then when they do, you shut them down and you don't listen and you make them feel bad, well, guess what? Everything in your body language has said, don't speak truth to power.
Yes.
I think I can be the best at getting the brilliance and the talent out of every person there, and that's how we'll really grow as an organization.
Very good advice. I need to listen to that. Let's talk about media and technology and how they are just, light speed here. They're constantly evolving, okay?
Right.
But given that, when you were at some of the companies you were working for and running marketing for, were there any marketing tactics that you saw that worked exceptionally well?
I think right now the world of marketing is drunk on tactics.
Yes.
And one of the things that I am extremely just concerned about is that everybody is looking at all these different tactics kind of in isolation and not really thinking about what's the company strategy, what's the brand strategy, what's our 3-year strategy, our annual operating plan, and sort of where do these tactics fit in. I feel like we've all gone upside down and we're chasing the tactics kind of in a vacuum. And one of the examples that I used at my recent company, shortly after I got there, Facebook Live kind of took off. And somebody said to me, well, what's the marketing department's strategy for Facebook Live? And I just kind of laughed, sort of like one of those, like where your coffee comes out. And I said, we're actually trying to figure out what our strategy is for the company and for the brand and get sort of integrated seasonal planning and these like integrated marketing moments out there. And then we'll figure out where Facebook Live fits into it. We're not just going to have sort of a random Facebook Live strategy.
Yes.
So with all of that said, I do like, I think about the first, 20 odd years that I spent in corporate America, and it was all sort of traditional marketing tactics. It was Pepsi, it was big TV, it was a lot of billboards, sometimes print, freestanding inserts, things like that, like all the traditional stuff. interestingly, what I always tell people is none of that has gone away. Not like because we have digital media and social media, like, oh, we no longer have billboards, we no longer have TV,
Yes.
we no longer have radio. All of that still exists. Plus, you have an entire new world of tactics, which I think makes marketing even so much more interesting than it was 30 years ago when I first, went into marketing right out of school. So I am, to give your question its due, I do love the impact that social media has had on marketing. And I think about when I started in marketing, we were shouting at people and we were talking at people. And now when I've looked at these companies, the past two that I've worked for, Keurig is a company. Women talk about how they would give up their husbands before they'd give up their Keurig machine. One of my best friends and I, we talk a lot about this notion of, there needs to be a sniglet for this, of that word, which is fear of waking up and having run out of K-Cups. That fear of not having K-Cups in your home. People love their K-Cups. They love their Keurig machines. You take that and you multiply it by 1,000, and that's how people feel about their Peloton bikes.
Yeah.
Most people, and I'm a very rabid home rider, people cannot imagine once they get a Peloton bike, they can't imagine what their life was like when they didn't have a Peloton bike, in their basement or in their home gym. So I love what social media has done in terms of it allows us not to shout at people, but to talk to people and to really listen. And so, I tell people all the time, when you have 10 minutes, just like go on the official Peloton Rider Facebook page and watch what people are saying.
Sure.
I used to do the same thing at Children's Place and at Keurig.
Yes.
And it wasn't what we were saying on social media that really was fascinating to me. What was fascinating was what people were saying to us. And then even more fascinating, especially true at Peloton, is when people use your page to talk to each other.
Yes.
And they almost forget that you there as the corporation are listening.
Yes.
And they're literally, when big social things happen in the world, they would go to our page at Peloton and talk to each other. But then when you watch them helping each other about calibrating the bike or which classes they liked or, heart rate training, all of that, so much listening that you can do via social media in a formal and informal way, that's actually the thing that I think
No, it's
I'm most
amazing.
excited
I
about.
love what you said because listen, this is some crazy stuff we're entering into. And especially, we spoke about it on the phone, it's like the past year. There's this new invention of technology that can be incorporated into media all the time. But I think everyone has gone bonkers with the okay, let's take it from what you were saying, which is, back in the day, your TV, your outdoor, your print, and we just went over here.
Right.
Okay, and it's about integrating that into, you still have to build a brand and promote the brand, and you can't substitute one for the other. And that's, think a lot of companies are doing because there are these new, hot topics and cool ideas, and they're saying, we don't need TV, we're going to integrate this.
Yeah.
And that, I don't agree with. I know there's many of you out there that would say, yes, we should, but I agree with you. I think.
Yeah. And I think, back to the whole sort of courtyard connections, my whole feeling is, even if you just talk about media for a minute, people love to ask what's the most effective media vehicle. I have a lot of conversations with people where they won't do sort of the right plan for the business because they don't know how they're going to measure it.
Correct.
And so I think we're sort of a little also drunk on attribution modeling. I love attribution modeling, and I love that it helps us make smarter decisions, but it should guide our decision making, not make the decision for us.
Correct.
And so I like the notion, again, this whole theme in my life about connections, I like the notion of thinking about how a physical store and TV and Facebook prospecting or retargeting, how that all actually works together in an integrated fashion.
How do marketers, reconcile their, desire to implement the new concept and strategy of the month, with the fact that even at these monster companies, a lot of as they call them, the test and learn funds have really dried up. These are really cool things that you've been talking about and we've touched on, but companies that spend a few $100 million a year, they're still, there's a budget for certain things, but then there's these new things, augmented reality and addressable TV and all these things. How does one deal with that when there's
Right.
all these new cool things, but there's no budget for it?
Right. I think for some of these new innovative technologies, the mistake that people make is they feel like they need to spend big to test it. With most of these things, you can get your feet wet and directionally see if there's a there. Not definitively that you can prove out, to the nth degree as though it were the proof that you needed to send a spaceship to the moon,
Yes.
but that you could prove directionally that there might be a there. I think you can do that with a very small budget. And so an example, this isn't like a cool new thing, but one of the things we tested when I was at Peloton was direct mail. And everybody hates direct mail. Like everybody hates direct mail. I want to hate direct mail. I spent a year at the Children's Place trying to kill, direct mail. There's a lot of things about direct mail that are awful. But at the end of the day, it's actually one of the most testable things that there is in terms of test and control, and you can see it. And so we had a pretty big test budget set up to test direct mail at Peloton, and there wasn't a lot of excitement there. And I said to our acquisition marketing leader, I was like, you know what? You can test it for 10% the budget that you were thinking of testing it. So you can do it. You can do it very quietly. It's not going to upset the apple cart of our whole budget.
Right.
And you will get some directional learning.
Yes.
You might not get enough to say, oh, I'm now going to put in, $10 million next year. But you can at least test your way in to say, is there something there?
Yes. Okay, so I have one more question for you.
Plain. I prefer plain M&Ms.
Yeah, I know.
Not peanut.
What keeps a CMO up at night? What are the nightmares that they get?
Yeah. So I think the question should be, what doesn't keep a CMO up at night? Because I think that would probably be an easier question to answer. So I think the hardest thing about being a CMO, so there's kind of two different things that I'd say. One is a CMO, it's an incredible job. It's a complicated job. If you think about it, you're the CEO of the marketing department and everything that goes along with that. But marketing, probably more than any other profession, you're also intimately involved with the culture of the company, not just the brand voice and the brand culture, but marketing and culture to me are so inexorably linked. And all the things that keep a CEO up at night in terms of revenue and profitability, that's the same stuff a CMO has to worry about. So I feel like you have all of the same anxieties that a CFO or a CEO or chief revenue officer has, plus all of the other things that you have about the brand. And things like, what's gonna break out on social media. Back in the day, we felt like we could control everything that was being said. No. You can't control. Consumers own our brands.
That's
right. So I think there's a lot of that. As I mentioned earlier, you've all the old tactics that you had to be responsible for, plus this whole new world of social and digital media. But I actually think the biggest thing is just how do you balance the short and the long term?
Yeah.
And so as a CMO, it is your responsibility to help build enduring brands and great companies. And yet you want to do things that are going to build those over the long term, not just sell stuff tomorrow, sell K-cups, sell bikes, sell children's leggings, sell soda, but you also want to build these enduring brands. Mm-hmm. And so you have this kind of, long-term need that you have to satisfy, but then, day in and day out, if it's a public company, you're in front of investors every quarter. If it's a private company, you're still in front of your board. I know for the boards that I serve on, we've got, monthly calls with the management team. And so regardless of what stage of business and what size of business, public or private, you have to report back, to investors or to the board. And so you're trying to manage these very short-term results with building a long-term and enduring brand. And I think at the end of the day, that's actually the hardest thing for a CMO.
Interesting. Okay, love to do a little game with you. We like to call it speed swap. I'm going to say a word. You just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. Doesn't matter. Not a lot of thought into it.
I'm a little nervous about this.
Don't be nervous.
I'm kind of like, I can't prepare.
Don't be nervous.
Okay.
This is not the elections here. Hold on. Entrepreneur.
America.
Innovation.
Important.
Programmatic.
Whatever.
Hot yoga. Oh boy. LinkedIn.
Essential.
Facebook.
Life-centric.
It's bar time. I like to do a little stuff with my guests, little trade, okay? Because part of our industry is, again, we're a corporate trade barter company, is, we trade media for companies' assets. So this is not exactly the same, but I have a gift/trade for you, Lori. So for our listeners and our viewers out there, I read, and it's so funny you bring up M&Ms, that Lori she's a health nut, but before she starts her day, you have
M&Ms.
And before you end your day, at the end of the day,
M&Ms.
M&Ms.
And throughout the course of the day.
We have
Oh my God.
a giant, looks like Costco size, party size bag of M&Ms.
I call this single serve, by the way.
Single serve for Lori.
Right.
And a cute green, look how pretty she is. Green M&M for Lori so she can think of us when she's eating her M&Ms in the morning at night.
Oh, I love that.
Now,
that's the green on my Courtyard Connections logo,
perfect.
by the way.
So it goes well.
Yeah.
So now I am willing to part with these.
Okay.
But you got to make me an offer back.
Okay.
So
Am I offering you?
you can offer me whatever you want. Maybe some, I'm thinking out loud here. Courtyard connection service, maybe a 30-minute call or something like that.
a 30-minute call with one of your, like an early stage client or somebody who's in the...
I'm thinking, unless you got something either crazy or different.
Well, I was going to say,
if
you, I could give you sort of a little 30 minutes about how to get the most out of your Peloton bike, which instructors I like.
That would be incredible.
How to use the perfect combination of like when to use like a 20-minute class versus a 45, show you around the new Beyond the Ride stuff,
Love
yoga,
that.
things like that. I could
Love
do that.
So no, that's perfect. I'm going to take that offer you made me, and I'm going to offer it to the viewers out there and our listeners, because this is what we do. This is how barter works.
I love that.
We take something and we're going to go back. So if someone's willing to trade me something even cooler than what Lori had, I'm looking for the best offer out there. They will get this amazing, one-on-one, either over the phone or maybe Lori will have breakfast or something with you or whatever. Go out and have a cup of Green Mountain Keurig coffee. For the best offer out there for this tutorial on this incredible bike, Peloton, remember. So, are you happy with your trade?
I'm very happy with my trade.
Okay,
my goodness, I'm so happy.
Perfect. Well, I got to tell you, this was really, honestly, an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Very enlightening about
thank
the
you.
industry, really was. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For all our listeners and viewers, be sure to tune in the next time on The BAM Show. Barter and Marketing, we get you the real deal. I read somewhere, didn't want to say that one, did you? Was that your first?
I was my first job ever out when I was in high school. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts.